Hey there, folks. It's Mike Tramp from White Lion, and you're listening to the Thunder Underground.
Welcome to episode 401 of the Thunder Underground podcast. Trent here as always, and this week's an excellent one because Mike Tramp is here. Mike Tramp, of course, is the voice of White Lion, and he is here to talk about tons of stuff throughout the history of White Lion, but most importantly, he's got a brand new album coming out this Friday, The Songs of White Lion 2. He had The Songs of White Lion 1, first volume, came out about a year ago, last summer. This is the second offering. We're going to dive deep into that, talk about everything that went on with this, talk about some past stuff, the history throughout White Lion, his solo music, all kinds of stuff. So we've got a lot to jump into. But before we do that, I need to let you know who sponsors this podcast. And that would be DEB Concerts. DEB Concerts is a promoter based right here in the Tulsa area. They brought tons of great acts to this area over the past several years. They also booked the Roadhouse stage at Rocklahoma. And that's definitely something to talk about because guess what? Rocklahoma is basically 1 week away. Rocklahoma is Labor Day weekend every year. It's next Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but it kicks off with the Thursday pre-party. You have to have a ticket. A weekend, you can't have a single day ticket. If you have a full weekend GA or VIP ticket, you can go to the pre-party, and that will feature Tom Kiefer of Cinderella, Faster Pussycat, Eyebolt, and Scarlet Rocks. The rest of the weekend on the Roadhouse stage will feature bands like Vixen, Enough's Enough, one of my all-time favorites, Winger, a great new band out of the Oklahoma area called Dime Store Riot that has been on this podcast before, and many others. So be on the lookout for that if you're going to Rocklahoma. Check out all these bands at the Roadhouse stage. Hit up rocklahoma.com for ticket info, and of course hit up debconcerts.com for info on everything they've got going on. And of course, anytime there's announcements on new shows, we bring it to you right here as well. DEB Concerts is on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook at DEB Concerts. So be sure to give them a follow and let them know you heard about them right here. We've also got Sunset Tattoo, a tattoo shop located in Midtown Tulsa. Their tattoos are done get 'em proper. They're state licensed. They've got well over 25 years of experience, Native American owned, and there's a female artist full-time on staff. If you give a call, a message, or walk in, you can talk about the work you're looking to have done. They'll sit down with you. They've got great ideas. If you don't have a fully formed idea, even if you do, they'll make it happen. So get in there and give them give them the chance to talk to you about what you're looking to have done. You can find all photos of tons of their work throughout the years on their socials. Facebook and Instagram are both Sunset Tattoo Tulsa. I've had work done by Jake myself, and I am extremely happy with it more than once, and I'm going to have it done again in the future. So be sure to get over to Sunset Tattoo and let them know you heard about them right here on Thunder Underground. Okay, like we talked about right up front, Mike Tramp is the guest this week. Mike Tramp is, of course, the only vocalist of White Lion. He has continued on since White Lion, disbanded. He reformed White Lion at one point, and that's something that he talks about, that era of time. I actually saw the band during that era of time when they released the Return of the Pride album, went on that tour. He kind of goes into details on that and why it didn't work out so well and what he's doing now with Mike Tramp, basically going out as a solo artist performing all the hits as White Lion. Because, normally when he would do a solo show, of course, he's going to play some of his solo music along with these White Lion songs. But what he's doing right now is celebrating the history that this man helped create, along with Vito Bratta, James Lomenzo, Greg Bissonette. And, hey, speaking of James Lomenzo, a member of the classic era of White Lion lineup, he was on this podcast once as well, episode 250, quite a while back. Huge fan of him and everything he's got going on. He's now currently in Megadeth for the second go-around. So, check out that episode if you're a big fan of White Lion. But yeah, so the first album, Songs of White Lion, basically volume 1, just called Songs of White Lion, came out last summer, or last spring, I believe. It was sometime in 2023. And it featured all the songs you would expect to be on a White Lion. Basically a a White Lion, reimagining. I don't know if you want to call it that. He stays true to the originals for the most part with some slight changes there, but he also sings in the key that his voice is currently. And, there's some flair, there's some stuff going on in that album last year when the Children Cry, had a piano as its basis instead of guitar. That's something that Mike talks about coming up. But it had all the hits on it. Like I said, When the Children Cry, Tell Me, Hungry, Broken Heart, Little Fighter, Wait, everything you expect. So the Lady of the Valley as well. So the second album that comes out here in just a couple days features, some more deep tracks. And like Mike talks about in the interview, some stuff that he just really, wanted to bring out, and do new versions of. Songs like Lights and Thunder, that's already out for everyone to hear. Lonely Nights. It's also got Till Death Do Us Part, The Road to Valhalla, Don't Give Up, You're All I Need. Tons of great stuff if you're a White Lion fan. These are all, done very well. They held them to the highest standards. This isn't something that was just slapped together just to, throw out some project, just throw out something as a project. It's done very well, and he's out supporting it on tour as well. Mike Tramp's a guy that has relentlessly recorded, performed, and has just been a musician for the entirety of his career. That's a question I ask him in this interview, is that most guys that have been doing this as long as him and had hits during an era like that, go out on tour and rely on those hits as the tour, as their calling card, their nostalgia, whatever you want to call it. And some of those artists will put out an album once every few years if you're lucky. Some of them never do. But Mike Tramp, has consistently put out music. He's got, I think it's 15 solo albums, I believe, not even including these two recent Songs of White Lion albums. He had the other, like I said, the Return of the Pride album. He's got a lot of stuff going on. So just be sure to, check out all this stuff if you're a big fan and you haven't followed his career that closely. You need to check out these two albums, check out his solo work. So let's just jump into it and let's hear what Mike has to say about the Songs of White Lion and just everything else that's going on. Here's Mike Tramp. Question you've been asked a lot over the last year and a half, like, why did you feel this was the right time to do all this with these two albums, and what kind of prompted you, pushed you into this?
Yeah, we might as well get that out of the way and then get back.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I usually start by saying it was never part of my plan. I mean, I had ended White Lion in 91. I had started another band called Freak of Nature, recorded 3 albums. And in 96, I started my solo career, which would lead to 14 solo albums. And during the solo career, or solo years, that White Lion somehow once in a while it popped its head up and roared a beer here and there and calling me back into the wild. And the first time I followed that call, I was well unprepared, both mentally and in my soul, because I felt that I'd finished something, and that was it. And I wouldn't have finished it if I wanted to return to it. So then after 3 solo albums and then that White Lion disturbance, I continued with the 7 more solo albums, and everywhere I toured, half the poster sort of would remind people that this is the voice of White Lion. And I sort of felt that I couldn't disappoint them. So, in those years, I was just, playing acoustic solo. And I started, adding, more and more White Lion songs acoustic, which many of them were sort of written that way. They fitted well and that stuff. And I know that I performed, songs like Little Fighter and these things really well acoustic. They gave me a lot of space to do, but it's not what I planned on. And then finally, as I see, the joy in people and now that I've sort of maybe come to terms with what I wasn't coming to terms with earlier on, that I maybe was ready to revisit them, but also refurbish them for fitting into current time, not just sound wise, but mostly myself. That I was 25, 26 when I recorded these songs.
Yeah.
And now I'm 63. So I needed the songs to have some sort of, being legit in the way that we're not just doing the songs, but now I'm telling the story about these songs. And you're going to be able to hear that in my voice because this is a grown man that's singing these songs now. A man who's been through hell and high water, sailed the seven seas, in and out of court, all these kind of things. That has to be part of the songs.
And that's what, I really dig about, these two albums is that, obviously you're not trying to force your voice to what it was when you were 25 and you're singing it how you are now. And I mean,
Yeah.
is there, as far as like, say, just like the words, for instance, those were words you wrote 30, 40 years ago. Do they still, mean the same thing to you, or do they just feel like you're just singing something that's a part of you? I don't really know how to ask that question, right? But
No, no. I mean, it's. I totally get the point because what I would start saying by that is like when I look at some of those words that I wrote back then, I'm sort of like almost don't believe that I wrote them because I didn't feel really that my head was there with where I wanted to be in 1985, for example. That's when we're starting writing the songs to the Pride album. Just look what's going on in rock and roll in 1985. I know you don't have to, come up with them, but look at the albums and what's going on. I mean, rock and roll is just exploding everywhere in the world. It's king. Every concert is sold out. MTV's. I mean, it's just rock and roll 24/7 anywhere you go in America. And that's what I wanted to be part of. But now when I look back at the lyrics, I see traces of my upbringing and what I soaked up in the 60s and the 70s growing up in Denmark that I had brought with me to America. And even though I came here to be like a new Van Halen, sort of just what that image represented to me and drew me to America, as much as I also wanted to be like Journey and Steve Perry and that kind of thing. But that's not what I'm putting into the songs. That's not what. So the words, I mean, I don't have to think about the words. The words are in my spine. They're always there. But singing them today, I feel actually that I can convince you that I mean these words. And I'm not sure if I could have convinced you back then if you were the age you were right now. It was maybe easy enough to convince somebody 16, 17 because everybody was just having a good time and not really taking this out. But the point of my lyrics were really wanting to say something and establish something, but it's just 35 years too early. They became hits, and that's fine. And I understand all that. But now getting a second chance to sing these songs, I control the songs now. I own the songs. Back then, the songs owned me. I followed them. I followed the lyrics. Now I don't follow the lyrics. The lyrics are just there.
I like that. Were there any of these tracks on these two albums that, say, the original version, whether it be something about your voice or anything about the music that you just weren't happy with the finished product, that you like made sure that you put your vision on it now? Or, I mean, I'm not trying to like
No. I mean,
But yeah,
it's fair because what is? I mean, you have to because you're looking at two things. You're looking at the before and you're looking at the thing now,
yeah,
and it's something because it would be completely wrong for me to sit and say, well, I should. When I walked into the studio with White Lion with the rest of the guys, and when I was writing the songs with Vito and stuff like that, we were doing exactly what we were doing at that moment, and we thought we knew everything in the world. When we
yeah.
walked into the studio and we said, it's going to sound like this, this is like that Zeppelin, Van Halen journey and stuff like that. We thought we knew everything. Now looking back, it's crystal clear that we were still in the cocoon. We were not flying around like a butterfly. We were still in progress of becoming, developing, growing, arriving. We're still in transit. And it's almost like, I mean, I'm sort of like creating something here, which right on the spot. It's almost like we were destined to be going some further with it, so it would finally mature, but we never got there. But the songs in itself are matured or are the real deal. Now getting a second chance to do them, playing them in a different key, asking, of course, everything on these two albums is about the guitar because Marcus Nand has spent a lot of time, first of all, learning Vito's original parts and now transcribing them to a different key. It's basically impossible, but he managed it that you don't get the feeling that he's not playing 100% sort of what Vito's playing. So there's all these elements to this that had to come back and now go. But no matter what you say, it works. So obviously it could go further with that.
You mentioned Marcus, and like when you went in to record these, was there? I mean, these are your songs, through and through. As far as it goes with anybody that's working on them right now, it's your music. Did you take input from Marcus or from producer or anything? Was that, or was it entirely like, this is the way I want these songs to be, or did you bring in that outside input,
Well,
like on
Marcus and
the
I,
little changes and all that? Yeah.
Marcus and I have produced these songs. We created. I mean, I asked him if this was possible, so he spent the time and came back to me and saying,
Okay.
"Yeah, I'm nailing them." And he's a huge fan of Vito, and later on has become friends with Vito. There was no way that he was going to go in there and go against what has been written. It's as simple as that. I mean, that he's going in there with the highest respect for the original parts. Those were the parts he was sitting, learning when he was at Guitar Institute in Los Angeles as a younger guy and stuff like that. When White Line, he came to America, in there when White Line already finished, coming from Liverpool, England, and learn that. And then, he's sitting and playing that, and 30 years later, he would be playing it, recording it again.
Or were any of the songs ones that you hadn't like visited at all recently, like in like the live show over the past 15, 20 years, or were there anything that
Yeah,
like you really had
I
to like,
haven't really. Yeah, it's sort of in out. I'd only been playing that many White Lion songs, and they have
right?
been playing them in a sort of different way. So, like most have sort of already sort of discovered or confirmed, Volume one is obviously sort of what you would call the set list, the classic set list, the songs, the greatest hits, etc., etc. So, and when I went in to record the first album with Marcus, we did not think we were going to tour. We did not think anything. We just said, Mike's is going to do this album sort of just to leave the sound of these songs here now today and then continue with his solo career. And then we sit with the final product, and then people going, man, but you got to go out and play with these songs. And then we got out in front of the crowd and just realized that since White Line broke up, these songs have not really been played live. And once we toured all through 23, we knew we were going to do a new volume two. And then we also knew that now we were going to go in and pick the songs that we would love to play. They would be more sort of like the band songs to a
Yeah.
certain degree. Now we were not thinking about anything but just playing and recording the songs.
Yeah, that was kind of one of my questions. I figured the second album was more of just like what you wanted to do as opposed to the
Yeah, yeah,
greatest hits.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's that. I mean, I think that's just that's just a classic, thing that you do. Okay, okay. Now we got that out of the way. We got Waiting when the Children Cry and all that stuff. Now let's start with Lights and Thunder, 8 minutes long.
Yeah. So you're saying that you and Marcus produced these two, like Soren Anderson didn't work with you at all on these? Because
Oh
I know
yeah,
he
no, no.
worked with you.
I'm just saying that, yeah. I mean, Soren is part of both albums and
Oh,
and
okay.
and recording them and engineering them. But Marcus and I had done all the field work before, chosen the songs, figured out what key I was going to sing them in, and then Marcus would go and figure out and come back to me and says, "I can play that," and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, one thing, I think about whenever an artist does something like this is like, your diehard fans, hold these songs in high regard, the original lineup, all that. Was that any kind of consideration when you went into this? And have you got any feedback? You don't want to say negative things, but has anybody like, diehard fans like reached out to you about this in any way?
Well, there's always an internet trolls
Right.
every here and there, stuff like that. That's just good. I had to look at it in a different way that I'm no different than the fans. And sometimes I don't like to say that word. It makes them make them less than me. Uh, I'm also a rock fan. I also have a massive album collection. I got Phil Lynott and Bob Dylan and Springsteen tattooed on my arms and stuff like that. I mean, I don't, I'm not sitting and listening to Highway to Hell every single day. I was a big fan of that album come out. Sometimes I wait 25 years before I listen to the album again. We also got to realize as I've grown older, so has the audience. And they got kids, their wife, they maybe don't turn the speakers up as loud anymore and things like that. They maybe want to listen to it in a different way. So I think it does go hand in hand. And so far now, I mean, it's nine out of 10 that praise it, that it makes sense to them. They're not forgotten the original albums. They own the original albums. They were there. They discovered White Lion through the original albums, but they have enjoyed the journey through Freak of Nature after White Lion and all my solo albums, some of them that have followed me that way. And it's now, so they've seen, it's like that classic thing, of the ape and the caveman, slowly straightening up and finally becoming, Homo sapien, it's progress, a journey you follow and say, wow, I didn't think that they could actually keep evolving.
You kind of alluded to it earlier. I got the chance to see you live on the Return of the Pride tour. And, like what makes this different now than that? Even I mean, obviously it's different players, but you said you're in a better place. Like what makes these shows different than when it was, labeled as White Lion?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's interesting that you're saying that. I mean, because obviously you're catching me right, or you catching me right there where I was in a place, even though I of course instigated it, had created something that was not meant to be created. When I revisited, White Lion the first time, first called, Tramp's White Lion, and then, pushing it to see how much I could push, um, calling it White Lion, and then, writing an album and releasing an album that would get me into trouble because I couldn't use the name White Lion as a recording. I don't know if you know that album or so and so, but the only thing that album does not sound like is White Lion.
Right.
I mean, I put a band together, but in reality wanted to create much more a Deep Purple or a Journey or a White Snake or English version, UFO, classic rock bands than I wanted to recreate the sound of White Lion. And I would eventually discover that as I would go out there playing the clubs around the country and things like that, that this is it's almost like I was thinking that I was putting together an A team, but it wasn't an A team. And it wasn't their fault. It was my fault. I had put convenience together. I hadn't put musical things together. It's the completely opposite now. When we go out and play the songs right now, we honor White Lion. And of course, you have the founder and the front man and the songwriter in Mike Tramp in the front of the stage, sort of giving the audience that he's very comfortable right there. And between the songs, I bring the audience into the songs and we become one. We're really just a family. I mean, we're a band up there. We don't have evolving drum risers. We don't have fire. We don't have light changes. Most of the times we're at the mercy of the light man at the local venue or something like that. But one thing we do know, that's how to perform and play the songs to the maximum of how these songs should be played.
But when it comes to the new album, the track that really jumped out to me was "Don't Give Up." Like I really feel like your voice now almost kind of suits that song lyrically better. I don't know if that's just me, but I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
No. You're here. I mean, you can't run from that. It's just a fact. And by saying that, you're not saying anything wrong about the original version. But when you put the Pride album on, there is not in every song, but there is that sense of first time you're going to bed with a girl. You're up, you're just, man, you're full power. You're just going at it way too fast.
Right.
Because that's all you know at that moment. And when I launch into Don't Give Up and instantly reach, I mean, that the how high my vocal is right there, I have just given everything right now in the first note. There's no way I can go. And that eventually would come with time that I would start saying, hold off a second, give it a little space to grow. And don't think that higher is better. And it would take its natural toll because my voice would eventually change. It was never meant to be there where it was. I was never meant to, for the rest of my life, to be able to sing like that. It's funny right now, whenever I talk to my son, my youngest son, who's 16, and he goes, "Hi, Dad." And I'm like, this is like a revelation. My voice never changed through puberty. It
Really?
just, it was like that. It's just so maybe in reality, it did change, but my puberty came when I was 30.
Right.
And so it was naturally when we came to Main Attraction, even though there are a couple songs that I also try to strain, when we already re-recorded Broken Heart, then we moved it. I don't know if you play music yourself. I mean, originally written in D minor, it would be the first song Vito and I write, and it would be the highest song I would ever sing. On Main Attraction, we move it to B minor, and it by no means sound like, oh, okay, it's still not high. Now, on Songs of White Lion Volume 2, we're in F sharp minor, where we can almost see the ass of an octave lower of D. That's how high that song was, that I could almost sing it an octave lower and it wouldn't sound wrong. So that just really means you just went. I remember once being in a race running when I was young. It was going to be like a 5-mile race. And as the gun went off, I went full fang and stuff like that. And then bit by bit, everybody just caught up, and I ended up coming in last. It's just one of those things. I, of course, have no idea what, or any thought that I would ever be talking to you about me have redone these songs and stuff like that. But there are just times when you go, I sort of, but you know what? I couldn't have sung these songs in these keys when I was young.
Yeah.
I didn't have, that. That both comes with believing in it. Or, a lot of times when we were at rehearsal and the band was so goddamn loud, if you sang down here, you couldn't hear. So you just went an octave up and then you started coming out through the horns. Oh, I can hear myself now.
Right. Obviously one of your biggest hits is When the Children Cry. And that one on the songs White Lion 1 jumped out of me because of the piano. And I just feel like that just gives it more power. And, even just like the state of the world now, the fact that the lyrics for that mean the same thing now that they meant 35
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, that says a lot,
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, it's just one of those. I mean, again, there's no way around telling that story that me writing that song, starting writing that song in 1985, when Ronald Reagan is the president, rock and roll is king around the world. MTV is king. Everything just looks like life is just damn great. And here I am writing a song that today sounds like it was written for Ukraine, that is written for the Middle East crisis or whatever. I mean, for just here we are, fucking it up even more than we did back then, And it's just one of those. So that guitar on the original version belongs there. We on purpose did not want to touch it, recreate it, leave it as the original part. It's sort of like Dust in the Wind or Stairway to Heaven. Those original parts are just there. It's like if you're going to redo Stairway to Heaven, then do it with piano or something like that. It's just that's holy ground. So I mean, I've done it for so many years with the piano, and I felt exactly, it's sort of that's how we finish it.
Well, I mean, you mentioned that, and being like the age you were in your 20s when you were writing that, and like you said, the world around you in rock and roll was kind of just like the majority of it was, sex and most of the songs
Everybody
about
was
women
having
or
a good
something.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
what was it that
don't bring the party down by depressing lyrics.
yeah. So what was it that kind of pushed you to that, at that age in your life to write that?
There was nothing that pushed me. It simply just came natural because or not because that's just what I would think. And like I said before, you write something with unconsciously. I mean, grown up in Denmark and grown up in the environment that I grown up with, we were more aware of what wasn't good than what was good. And I had grown up and seen the hippies protest the Vietnam War, even though Denmark, a little country of 5 million people, had nothing to do with the Vietnam War and things like that. So this was daily stuff for me in a different way. We didn't have um, television like there was in America, that where you could escape for, Star Trek or, The Odd Couple or Honeymooners. Now I'm just mentioning some of the stuff that I discovered when I came to America, or things like that. No. So it was very, very hardcore. And I'd grown up in that kind of environment, which is also why Bob Dylan, Neil Young, and that kind of folk protest sort of awareness stuff became the foundation of what I would become. Getting an acoustic guitar myself and sitting and listening to the other ones in the park and playing these songs. And when we were summer vacation or weekend trips with the youth club, I would be sitting there and everybody go, "How many roads must I?" And that it just became part without thinking about it, knocking on heaven's door. original Dylan have no clue what the hell he's singing about. But it would be, once you remove the image of Mike Tramp with the long blonde hair and the colorful clothes and the 80s video, forget that for a second. When Vito and I would sit down, and Vito would sit with the Stratocaster, and I would sit with the Dylan guitar, and maybe I would start with a 3-4 folk chords and a melody, and Vito would go, and then he would start playing the progression of it and stuff like that. And I would flip the guitar over, and now it would become the drum kit, because now Vito had gotten the start if it was me starting the song. So the songs would have its birth there. The song would not start out as Running with the Devil or that kind of stuff. It would start out in the purest form of a song. Imagining, not imagine, but known some, an interview when you're here early on, Lennon or McCartney talk, oh, we went just down around the corner to the pub and wrote 20 songs, and then we came back. And you go, holy fuck. And, so the raw form of the song is just like, she loves you, yeah, yeah. It is just what it is. Then you add the drums and stuff, but the song in itself is a song. And Vito and I were both very much inspired by the big songwriters like Elton John and stuff like that. As much as we loved Van Halen, as much as we loved Black Sabbath or Ozzy or Priest or Maiden or Sammy Hagar or Journey or whatever, we knew that when we were talking about the song before anything, that the song had to work in that format.
Well, I'm sure the answer to this question is probably not, but is there any, did this inspire you enough to like want to do more, like a Songs of White Lion 3? Are there any tracks out there that you were kind of like on the cutting room floor kind of thing?
Well, I mean, there definitely are. There definitely would be 10, 11 songs that I could go in there and say, you know what, the third one is going to be the Black Album, not cover wise, but now we're exploring what we sort of had. Vito and I were exploring with certain songs. I think that I probably have a Mike Tramp solo album coming next.
Okay.
That does not mean we could not return to do this. I mean, it's really just fun to go in and do this again. I mean, there's not 1,000 record stores around the country waiting for this album, and they're gone. There's an online shop and things like that, and then there's Mike Tramp selling them and signing them after the shows and stuff like that. So we're really doing it for the chase is better than the catch. We're actually loving the process of going in and recording and going through that joy it is to be a band in a studio and create the songs and do small changes and going, yeah, but let's just add this. We also going to have to tell ourselves that there are times when most have been taken away from us, that we need to find that moment where we still live playing rock and roll. We still are alive and we feel it, and it's not going out to pay to play to earn the rent or the car payments or things like that,
Right. Well, if you do it again, if you're doing it again, I'll throw in a vote for She's Got Everything. So
just no, dude, I wanted it. I wanted that on that. I wanted on this album. That would, of course, that would definitely be one of those. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a badass riff. That's a badass riff. It, that song has definitely stood the test of time.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I mean, you've mentioned, your solo work. I mean, you just had an album earlier this year as well. The amount of output you've put out over the past 20 years is like impressive, because where a lot of artists, from your era just kind of rely on, legacy and nostalgia. Like, what is it that drives you to constantly be, writing and recording music?
Yeah, you know what? that is a great question that actually challenged me to to find a real explanation, or not to explain it in because I have to find a way, but why is that is happening? And what is the difference between me and basically not most bands, most singers, most guitar players from the 80s that were sort of my competition, my comrades, my friends, etc., etc. Most, if any, has recorded two, max three solo albums in whatever that would have been. I mean, I've recorded 14 solo albums. My solo albums are an extension of something that I want to express or want to get up, because all my solo albums is about me. It's my life. It's my storytelling. And I've said this before, that in the two bands, White Lion and Freak of Nature, me, myself, I was a fictitious person. I was part of a band. I couldn't be up there, saying me, but once the album said Mike Tramp, it I am the character. I am the person. I am the one, in those movies, that a continuation. I in many ways I've explained that my solo albums is like a long journey on sort of an endless highway, and each album represents an exit where I would go off the road, park the car, maybe look back where I've been, but also sit and think about where am I going next? And that would become the next solo album. I write these albums almost like a book, in the way that I write it song by song. And I know when I get there, even Vito and I wrote that in White Line. We didn't write multiple songs. We knew when we had written the album, which is also why that doesn't exist any bonus track of unreleased White Line material. We wrote it and believed in ourselves that we had written the album. And I do the same thing with my solo albums. Very early on, as I'm writing, if I'm messing around with something, I put it aside right away, and I stick to that. The next song is that. And to me, it is more about that. I feel I'm honest to myself, that I believe in the quality and not the quantity. It's not a matter if I could sit and write 20 songs. I need a break after I'm done with the last song. Recharge, sort of, because my solo albums is my own world of like AC/DC. They have a similarity. They have a continuous sound. They're not diverting and saying, okay, now he's in Miami doing disco. Now he's doing jazz. No. There are exactly what Mike Tramp is. It's like when you open my wardrobe and whatever, you see what is Mike Tramp in there. And that really hasn't changed for the last 30 years. There's the boots, there's the jeans, there's the leather jackets, there's the different things that represents me. You go into my studio, there's my studio, and there's a big bookshelf. The books there represents what Mike Tramp is, what I do. My refrigerator. I mean, it describes what a person you are. The first thing you do is usually who you are. Most people that play with me and stuff like that, the first thing they play is somebody else's song. When I test my guitar on stage, I go ding, 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 ring, and it's usually the start of a song that I'm gonna write. But you will never ever hear. First of all, I can't play any of this, so I would never start playing "Walk This Way" or "Whole Lot of Love" or "Dance the Night Away with Me." No, I'm Mike Tramp. I do me. I'm the world's best me. I'm not very good at being anybody else. And most of all, I know my limitations. And I will not go beyond them. I will not push myself. I have pushed myself on the early album. I do this. The thing that I sing is the way it's going to be.
Well, obviously, we all evolve as people. Like when your lyrical content compared, to 30, 40 years ago to now, like what is it that inspires you different, like as far as just when you're writing that it might have whenever you were 20 or 30?
Well, there's nothing more inspiring, regardless of how sad it is, that basically, I've been revisiting, my sort of my sad, marriage that I've had for like almost, 16 years, and my two kids that were born in there that I love with everything in me, but have not been that much part of. And they come out in my lyrics. So I'm telling my story, for example, and I bring, a song about my mom, song about my brother, song about my dad. I sing about me. I don't have to get up in the morning and wondering what it was I said, because it is what I am. So I don't have to sort of retract things I've said, or because it's easy to answer when you just tell the truth. And you also be prepared that maybe that's not what other ones to say, but I can only be me. And it's much easier. I don't have to go up and look in the mirror and wonder if I'm going to be Gene, Paul, Chris, or Ace. I'm just me.
Well,
Also
last year,
behind.
yeah, right. Well, you released What You Got Left, was that about a year or two ago with James Lomenzo joined you on it? Like, how did that process come together? Have you guys kept in touch or have you guys worked it all
Oh,
together?
James and I are the best of friends, and it's probably one of the sad things about the White Line that had James and I been the songwriters, because we shared our daily day together, because James were very much like me, very easy to get along, loved energy, loved doing stuff and things like that and stuff like that. Vito and I were like heaven and hell, so opposite, that all Vito was doing was just playing his guitar and go home. There was nothing else he was doing. And I'm not saying that in a derogative way. It's just a fact. And the fact is still 40 years later, that's what Vito's doing, no matter whatever the story is. But Vito and I were writing the songs, and Vito and I had the vision, and Vito and I had started the band. So there wasn't space for anything coming in. But James and I, after White Line disbanded, and James started playing with basically every rock and roll hero of mine, from
Yeah.
Ozzy to David Roth to whatever it was, and down the road, finally, securing himself a great position in Megadeth. And every time James comes around, we hang out and we talk. So this was, this song that I was suddenly I just written. I said, you know what? I'm going to release this song right now. It's just a matter of uploading. And so I had all these different guys just, play on it. I says, yeah, of course James going to play it. And he loved playing on it. He loved the song. And, my friend Johnny Gioli sang harmonies, and I had several other people playing, and I love stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's great dealing with people like that. It's great to have people wanting to be part of something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I saw Johnny Gioli on the credits for, the White Lion albums. Like, does he do harmonies for you on a lot of your solo albums
Yeah,
as well?
yeah, no, he just did. Johnny was the one who hooked me up with Frontiers, and created, the record deal that I signed with Frontiers. So I kind of held him hostage on the second album and says, okay, well, you got me into this mess. Now at least, So it's great. It's great. Johnny, I share a lot of things. A lot of views on how rock and roll has changed, and we both are outdoor people. We both love nature, and things like that. So it's nice to know that you're so secure in who you are as a person, that I have a farm in Denmark. That's where I live. I have tractors and some cattle outside in a little forest and stuff like that. And that recharges me and makes me fall in love again with being back on stage and, bad pillows in hotel rooms and feedback on stage. I mean, all those kind of things that you put up with in rock and roll. So it's in the early years. Also, when we came back on the road, I was very much into to outdoor fitness. A lot of mountain climbing that wasn't too dangerous. A lot of mountain biking. I had a lot of friends and stuff like that. So I was always very very active and got some of that out. I didn't come home and go to sit on a rock club and look at girls and stuff like that. I mean, that's what I saw them from the stage. So to me, that has given me the energy to balance, and I've not had a problem during my entire career um, to cut my hair off and let it grow back and stuff and get in touch with that, there can't be anything that's going to control you and say, hey, the hair, what, I mean, these were ways of me testing myself. I says, no, 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 this is me. This is me. The other stuff is just props.
We mentioned at the very beginning you got this tour coming up here in just like 3 or so weeks. Besides Marcus, who's going to be on the road with you?
Yeah, well, I got an old buddy, Jerry Best on bass, who was part of Freak of Nature. That I, so again, which Marcus always were part. This is where we met each other right there. And then we got Brent Arcement, a great drummer. It's from New Orleans, which also were the rhythm section from the last tour. So it's a band of brothers going out there. Grown ups, all besides Marcus, both are parents and respect towards each other, respect for life, respect for the audience, and all those kind of things.
Man, well, I really appreciate you taking the time with me today, and I'm hoping I get a chance to get out to one of these shows here coming up.
I would love to see you, and I appreciate the interview. I truly enjoyed it. It's always nice, to actually be challenged, and start thinking about things instead of just being on autopilot.
I appreciate that.
You got it, brother. My
All right.
pleasure.
There you go, Mike Tramp. A huge thank you to John Freeman of Freeman Promotions for his help setting that up. And of course, a massive thank you to Mike Tramp for taking some time out there to talk to me on Zoom about everything he's got going on with the Songs of White Lion. Tons of other great stuff there that we talked about. Total honor for me. Like I've said tons of times throughout the years of this podcast, the 80s rock era, whatever you want to call it, hair bands, glam, melodic rock, sleaze rock, hard rock, just 80s rock. It's where I got my start as far as fully falling in love with music. From just being a little kid that listened to Bruce Springsteen and Michael Jackson, to all of a sudden just fully loving bands like, Poison, Def Leppard, Bon Jovi, White Lion, Cinderella, Warrant, and everything in between. And so, to be able to talk to a guy like Mike Tramp, huge honor for me. Like I said earlier in the podcast, or when this thing kicked off, if you're a fan, James Lomenzo has been on here as well. That was episode 250, if you want to go back and check that one out. He's done tons of stuff throughout the years. And we did talk a bit about White Lion. So we've also got a whole plethora of people from that era. I assume if you're listening to this, you're probably a fan of that era. Why wouldn't you be? So I'm just going to rattle off some names that have been on this podcast, such as Dee Snider of Twisted Sister, Jeff Tate of Queensryche, Mark Slaughter of Slaughter, Dizzy Reed of Guns N' Roses. Members of Frank Hannon of Tesla has been on here multiple times. Brian Wheat of Tesla has been on here. Jack Russell of Great White was just on this podcast earlier this year, episode 390, so not that long ago. Huge loss that we just recently lost him this past week. So also be on the lookout here on the podcast for an episode about Jack Russell coming very, very shortly. Mark Kendall of Great White has also been on a couple times, as well as members of Junkyard, Kix, Kiss, Gene Simmons has been on here, as well as Bruce Kulick. Members of Firehouse, Trickster, Whitesnake, Warrant, Winger, Reb Beach has been on here. Dead Daisies, John Corabi of the Dead Daisies and Motley Crue has been on here, as well as Glenn Hughes, formerly of the Dead Daisies. One of the greatest voices in the history of rock and roll, in my opinion. We've also, outside of the world of, the 80s rock, we've also had on guys, from bands like Megadeth, Testament, Shinedown, Hellstorm, Breaking Benjamin, Seven Dust, Typo Negative, Corrosion and Conformity, Prong, Helmet. The list is huge and long. 400 episodes before this one. The most recent episode was C.J. Pierce of Drowning Pool. So see, we're just all over the place when it comes to rock and roll. So dig back through some of those past episodes, check them out. You can listen wherever you're listening right now. Be sure to follow, like, subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. You can listen Spotify, iTunes, Mixcloud, SoundCloud, most anywhere podcasts are heard. If you Google Thunder Underground, you'll probably see the Ozzy song first, and that should be the next entry. Right after that, you can find Thunder Underground at our website, thethunderunderground.com. You can also listen directly there. On all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, on TikTok now as well. Be sure and follow there at Thunder Underground. Like I said, previous episodes coming up. If you're a fan of this era of rock, you probably like Michael Sweet, right? He's one of the all-time great voices of the era of Stryper. Recorded an episode with him recently, so that'll be coming very soon. Also got an episode coming up very soon with Tim Montana, a great new hard rock artist who's out on tour right now with Bush Candlebox and Jerry Cantrell, and he's also playing tons of the rock festivals, including Rocklahoma next week. So he might be on that preview episode. You'll just have to wait and see. Got some other stuff in the works, but until then, I appreciate you listening now. If this is your first time or your 401st time, thank you for being here. If you're at Thunder Underground, if you're at Rocklahoma, of course say hi, like I say every time. Camping in the VIP section on row AV. Can't miss me. There's a giant banner. All right. Once again, a huge thank you to Freeman Promotions, DEB Concerts, Sunset Tattoo, and of course Mike Tramp. And until next time.
Thunder Underground, y'all.